Okay, good morning, grade 12. We are going to look at the profit and loss situation in the short run for the monopoly today. Same thing as in the perfect market. In the short run, there's three possibilities. Your monopoly can make an economic profit, a normal profit, or an economic loss. All right, so today we're going to look at the economic profit and the economic loss. And the same as in the perfect market, it is all about the placement of your average cost graph. That is what will determine if the monopoly is making a profit or a loss. All right, remember, every single graph looks exactly the same until we add the average cost. All right, so it's the placement of the average cost that is very, very important. So if we look at the first equilibrium position, which is the economic profit, we know by now that your monopolist will make an economic profit if his average revenue is more than his average cost, or his total revenue is more than his total cost. All right, on the graphs, obviously we work with averages. We do not work with totals. So on the graph, the placement of the average cost curve, it has to be below your average revenue curve. All right, if the graph is below average revenue, that is going to mean that your average cost is less than my average revenue. But what is important now is that we follow the steps. Now, when we draw the graphs, we are going to follow exactly the same steps that we used in the perfect market, only the graph is going to look significantly different. Okay, remember your cost curves look exactly the same, but your revenue curves look completely different. So when we do step one, in step one, we are supposed to draw demand and average revenue and marginal revenue. Now, because we are in the monopoly now, your demand curve is going to have a negative slope. Remember, in the monopoly, there is only one producer. So this one producer represents the entire industry. And our market demand curve is always negative. All right, even in the perfect market, your market demand curve was negative. It is the individual producer's graph that was horizontal. So because in the monopoly there is only one supplier, his demand curve, the monopoly's demand curve, is the market demand curve. And that is why it has a negative slope. And then remember, we said in all the market structures, average revenue is always equal to the price. So your demand curve also represents your average revenue curve. But because of the negative slope on the demand curve, the implication of this is that if the monopolist wants to increase his output, if he wants to sell more, he has to decrease his price. And therefore, your marginal revenue is no longer equal to the price. In the perfect market, marginal revenue and price was equal because your price was constant. Your price now is no longer constant. If he wants to increase his output, he has to decrease his price. So the price is going to change. So for unit 1, and as I said, literally just for unit 1, your price and your marginal revenue will be the same. But after that, because he has to decrease his price, his marginal revenue will always be less than his price. And therefore, his marginal revenue curve is below his demand curve. All right, always lower because marginal revenue is less than the price. Okay, so this is step 1. Step 1 is to draw demand and average revenue and marginal revenue. In the perfect market, it was one horizontal graph. We are not in the perfect market anymore. We are in the monopoly now. So both of these graphs will have a negative slope, and marginal revenue is always below your demand curve. In step 2, we have to add the marginal cost. Okay, remember what I said? The revenue curves looks different, but your cost curves look exactly the same in all the market structures. So when we are adding the marginal cost, we are just going to do it. You draw your Nike swishy and you label your graph immediately. Remember, if your graph does not have a label, you will not get the mark. All right. Once we have added marginal cost, my step 3 is to find profit maximization. Profit maximization rule is the same for all the market structures. Profits are always maximized where marginal cost and marginal revenue is equal. Now it just looks a little bit different because we are not in the perfect market anymore. No horizontal graph, a little bit more complicated because there's more than one intersection now. So we can't just go for the intersection and label it E. We have to look carefully. Profits are maximized when marginal cost and marginal revenue is equal. So your profit maximization is not there. It is where marginal revenue and marginal cost intersect. So there we're going to make our little bolletjie and we are going to label it point E. Okay. At profit maximization point, we now need to know what is the price and the quantity. Again, in the perfect market, each individual producer was a price taker. So the price was already there because the market determined the price. In the perfect market, all the individual producer had to do was to decide on his output level. How much am I willing to produce at the given market price? Now, in the monopoly is a price maker. He is the market, so he has to determine the price and the quantity. He has to decide on a price-quantity combination where he will maximize his profits. But now, very important, at profit maximization point, to find the price, you are not going to do this. You do this and you're signing up for an early death. Okay, this is not the price. At point E, the two graphs that are intersecting here is marginal revenue and marginal cost. So this value here, if we were to write a value there, it would not be the value of the price. It would be the value of marginal revenue and marginal cost. That is not what we want. We want to know what is the price. So we find the price on the demand curve. When you draw demand is a price-quantity combination. So from your profit maximization point, you're going to go dotiki up until you touch your demand curve. If you use colors, then it's easy to see now. My demand curve is red. So as soon as you reach the demand curve, you make your bolletjie. Remember, you do not make the bolletjie in the middle of nowhere. It has to be on your demand curve. And once you've made your bolletjie, then you're going to give it a value on the side. Okay, obviously, you can do P1 or you can give it a monetary value. I am going to give it a monetary value because I'm going to show you the calculations and we need numbers for that. So that is your price. Now, from profit maximization, you move upwards to the demand curve. Your demand curve will indicate the price. Then to find the quantity, you're going to use whatever we've done previously. It's exactly what you're going to do now. You go down towards your x-axis because that is where you're going to find the quantity. Dotiki until you get to the axis and then you give it a value. Again, you can do Q1 or you can do a number. I'm doing a number for calculation purposes. All right, and this is step 3. And up to this point, every single graph is going to look exactly the same. Okay, because why? Because the placement of our average cost is now going to make this either an economic profit or a normal profit or an economic loss. Okay, we want to draw an economic profit. So we know our theory, okay, average revenue is more than average cost. So at my profit maximization point, my average cost curve has to be below my demand curve, my average revenue curve. All right. Again, when you add your average cost, you always do it in pencil first so that you know that you can get the shape and the positioning right. If you make a mistake, you don't have to restart your whole graph. You just wipe out the average cost and you redo the average cost only. Okay. So now, before you do your average cost, you're going to watch it what I'm doing first, and then you can pause the video to add your average cost. All right. 3 things that is important when we add the average cost. the shape of the average cost, it has to look like the smiley. The relationship with marginal cost, remember marginal cost and average cost is married. Your marginal cost must always intersect your average cost where average cost is at its lowest. And then the positioning of the average cost, it must be below my average revenue. In the perfect market, it was easy because my average revenue was a horizontal graph. Now it has a negative slope. Okay, so again, it doesn't matter what happens before profit maximization. It doesn't matter what happens after profit maximization. But at my profit maximization point, average cost has to be below my average revenue. So this line, this dotted line that you made all the way down to the axis, that is where your profit maximization is happening, along this line. Okay, at profit maximization, what is the value of my average revenue? Remember, average revenue equals the price. So this bolletjie that you made on your average revenue or your demand curve, this is where your average revenue is at this point. So when you add the average cost, all you need to do is add it below this bolletjie on your demand curve. All right, so it can be in between, yeah? Okay, in between your average revenue and your equilibrium point. It can literally go through your equilibrium point, that is fine, or it can be even lower than that, as long as it is lower than my average revenue at this point. All right. Obviously, the lower down you put it, the bigger the profit is going to be. Okay, so when you draw it, remember it must intersect with marginal cost where the average cost is the lowest. If it's in colors, it is easier for you to see what you are supposed to be doing because now there's lots of graphs that you could potentially be intersecting with. I know I'm aiming for the orange one. All right, so if I draw my average cost, I'm going to go down, down, down. Now I'm intersecting marginal revenue. I'm not turning up now. I must go more down, 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 up to the point where I touch my marginal cost. Okay, as soon as I touch my marginal cost, that is where I'm going to turn up. All right, so you can see here now my lowest point of average cost is here where I'm intersecting my marginal cost. All right, so then you label this graph average cost before you forget. Okay. So if you need to pause this video now, you can pause the video so that you can put in your average cost and then continue watching when you are done. Okay, so if you have your average cost, we now need to do the shading. All right, so you need to know now, you need to find the limits of your shading. So obviously at my profit maximization, I already know that this is my average revenue. My average revenue is 20. I now need to find what is the value of my average cost. Now, from your equilibrium position, you need to move towards your average cost. So if you drew your average cost here at the bottom, you would be going down towards your average cost. If you've drawn it like I did, it is above your equilibrium. From your equilibrium point, you're going to go dotiki, 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 until you reach the graph. When you get to the graph, you make your bolletjie, and that is when you make your dotikis to the side. All right, and then you give it, obviously, a value. All right, so from profit maximization, you move towards your average cost to find the value of your average cost. And then once you've done this, you have your shaded area. So all you need to do now is do the shading. Remember, your solid lines are graphs. Your dotikis is what you are aiming for. It's guiding you with the shading. So you're going to shade across the solid lines, which is the graphs, over it. And you have your boundaries. Those dotikis up to the bolletjie, down the dotikis to the bolletjie, and the dotikis again to the side. That is your shaded area, a regular shape, a rectangle, or a square. Okay, so now what is important with the shading, remember when you do shade, you cannot shade or kill the graph underneath. You have to shade over the graphs, but we will still see the shape of the graphs. Otherwise, we cannot give you the marks for the graphs. So highlighter obviously is first prize. So if you take that, even if you don't have a highlighter, remember you can just draw like lines through there. You can shade in some way. If you do the coloring in thing, you can do that. but then you have to just do it lightly so we can still see the graphs underneath. Okay, so this is then the end of the graph now for the economic profit. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you the calculations. All right, the formulas for the calculations obviously stays exactly the same as what it was in the perfect market. All right, you are going to also draw there where you drew the graph. In the book where you draw the graph, you are also going to quickly copy these calculations as I do them, because this will serve as your example of the calculations. All right, obviously the graph that we have drawn only gives you the relevant information. Okay, so there's no extra points that is labeled. There's no excessive like extra prices and quantities or whatever. It only has what we are looking for. Obviously, when we do the activities, there's more than just what you need, and then you're going to need to know what to look for. All right, so if we calculate the profit or the loss, remember your calculation, your formula is total revenue minus total cost. All right, now what we used to do when we did the perfect market is we would do one calculation for total revenue and a separate calculation for total cost, and then we just minus the two. Now I'm going to show you an alternative method where you can do it in one step. If you are not comfortable with what we are doing now, you keep doing it the way that we've done it for the perfect market. Both of these are correct. Okay, so for total revenue, your formula is price times quantity. For total cost, it is average cost times quantity. Okay, we're just doing it in one step now. All right. So the price on your graph, remember you are looking for profit maximization, where marginal cost and marginal intersect, that is point E. You find the price on your demand curve. So up, 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 up. This is not the demand curve. This is average cost. Up, up, up until you reach your demand curve. My price is 20 Rand. My profit maximizing quantity is 50. All right, at profit maximization, what is my average cost? Up, up, up until I touch average cost. I can see that it is 15 Rand and my profit maximizing quantity is 50. All right, and if I do these calculations now, this will be 1,000 Rand minus, if I'm not mistaken, that is 750 Rand. So your total economic profit would be 250 Rand. All right. You can also use the other method that I showed you, okay, when we did the perfect market. Remember, we can also calculate economic profit or loss per unit. All right, how do we do this? It is your average revenue minus your average cost. All right, so again on the graph, average revenue at profit maximization is the same as the price. So it is 20. And my average cost at profit maximization up, up, up until I touch the average cost is 15. Okay, so my economic profit per unit is 5 Rand. All right, just remember, this is not the end of your calculation. You must now take your economic profit per unit and multiply it by the profit maximizing output. He's not just selling one, he's selling 50. Okay, so the 5 Rand economic profit times by the 50, and that is going to give you the 250 Rand economic profit. Okay, again, you're going to write both of these down in your book, but when you do the activities, you're going to choose one of these methods that suits you the best. All right, so you can choose either to do this method, either like this, or separate total revenue, separate total cost, and then minus, or you can do this method. Both of them should give you the same answer. In exam, you don't have to show both. You're going to choose the one that you are more comfortable with. Just again, the risk of using the second method is that you stop here by economic profit per unit and you don't do the second step, then you're only going to get half the marks. He's not making 5 Rand profit. He's making 5 Rand profit on every one he sells, and he is selling 50. So remember to multiply by the quantity.